Steel and Flame, Book 1 of the Guilds of Avlaan series is available on Amazon. If you like fluffy wolf lolly protagonists and Japanese light novels, follow the link below to check it out.
Hello, Leonardo Cornejo here, and today I want to talk about something that is relatively common in fiction, and it's the sympathetic villain. I hate it. I think we need to stop, seriously stop that. I think we really need to stop making sympathetic villains. I'm tired of them. I don't think they are that good. I think they should exist in the past. I think you can make your own sympathetic villain and it's not a bad thing. But I think we are, how do I say it? It's a saturated sector. There are too many. And it has reached the point that it is unhealthy. That's why I think we need to stop. At least I won't contribute to it. I don't want to write that many sympathetic villains. I think there is a difference between a redeemed villain and a sympathetic villain. A redeemed villain can be a complete asshole, can be entirely unjustified in his villainy, but his villainy is not that severe, so he's redeemable enough. And despite being a complete asshole, wait a second, I'll need to cut it, but I will return. As I was saying, a redeemable villain isn't precisely that horrible. For example, I don't know, the guy was a warlord, killed hundreds, and then he realizes he fucked up and starts helping the protagonists. That's entirely valid. That's entirely reasonable, but for redemption you need penitence. I think it is better when these villains, instead of being sympathetic, of the awakening sympathy, of awakening emotion, they improve as persons. They are like, yeah, I did this many horrible things, maybe for no reason. Maybe I just felt like killing hundreds, or maybe I just felt like stealing. But I realized I'm wrong, and I am acting with penitence. I realized I'm wrong, and I'm turning a new leaf. I think that kind of villain is better than the villain who says, "Oh, look, I was poor, grew up in a horrible neighborhood, and someone killed my dog, so I decided to start raping. And I feel no fucking regret because I am a resentful mutant, a spiteful mutant." That kind of villain, I don't like them. I don't like them, and I am exaggerating a bit, but I really don't like these villains who, how do I say it, who take pride in their evil and make an excuse up. As in, alright, you are evil, you are doing something bad, own it. Own it. You don't need excuse. You don't need to say, "Oh, I had this horrible childhood. My uncle fucked my mother in front of me on my bed in my birthday, and that got cocked." I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need an excuse for why someone is evil. I know it is interesting when you have an explanation of why someone is evil. I know it is interesting. It might add a few layers of depth. But there is a point when it becomes harmful, I think, when you have too many of these villains, and when you try to awaken sympathy, when it is a sympathetic villain, when you are like, "Oh, poor guy, I get it now. He's entirely justified. Of course he will become a fucking mass murderer. Someone didn't buy a bagel for him on his birthday. Come on, man. Come on, seriously." I don't like that kind of character, and I don't like the overabundance of them, because you get people who are coming up with excuses for these characters, and they start justifying them, and some people who actually become their own deluded sympathetic villains, who start doing horrible things horrible things, and they think they are justified because, I don't know, a traumatic experience, because oh, my dad didn't love me and he ran away. He went for cigars and never returned. So I am justified in abusing my friends. I think one of the many reasons we see more assholes nowadays are sympathetic villains. I'm convinced the overabundance of assholes comes from the existence of sympathetic villains. I think it comes from the fact that people are like, yeah, it's justifiable to do this horrible thing. It is justifiable to be evil because you were sad, because you went through something bad. And I know sometimes people go through bad things. Hold on a second. As I was saying, sometimes people go through bad things, but that isn't an excuse to do bad things. If you suffered, that's no excuse for you to cause suffering upon others. And that's why I hate sympathetic villains, because and intentionally sympathetic villains, not a villain with a backstory, not a redeemed villain who people start liking because the guy stopped being bad. For example, a Piccolo, the villain in Dragon Ball, well, he's a monster, he's a mass murderer, he killed hundreds. And then he starts focusing on trying to only kill Goku, and he stops hurting other people because he only cares about killing Goku. And then he finally kills Goku, and instead of doing something horrible, he does something honorable and starts protecting Goku's child out of pretty much his own free will, because well, nobody forced him. I mean, Goku was like very straightforward. Please take care of my son because you are the most reliable fighter here. It was not something he was forced into. He just decided, alright, I will do it because it's the honorable thing. And that's his path to redemption, and that's his redemption. It doesn't need to be a really strong penitence. I think the penitence should be twice as hard as the crime. Hold on, I will need to cut it again. So I was saying, I think the redemption, the penitence for the redemption should be harsher than the crime itself. For example, I don't know, if someone kills hundreds, maybe an act of self-sacrifice, maybe dying, maybe losing an arm, is justifiable. It's a way to redeem a character. A redeemed villain doesn't need to survive the act of redemption. It isn't mandatory to keep the redeemed villain alive. But I think that's better than a sympathetic villain. You don't need to make a villain likable, to make a villain relatable, let alone sympathetic. I don't think it's healthy. As I said, there are too many. I think it is fine to have a few, to have this or that villain who has his reasoning. I don't know, he was a war veteran, lost his child, and you decide not to kill the character, and you decide to maybe put him in a path of redemption, or make him reflect at the end. Reflect on his action. Make him say, well, maybe I was wrong after all. The problem is when you start making these characters who are shown as completely justified in their evil, whose purpose of awakening sympathy is basically making an excuse for them. I think that's bad. I think that's when the problem begins for me. I think we got too many of those. We got too many of these characters who are basically, oh yeah, he had a horrible experience in life and now he's entirely justified of hurting others. I think that's bad. And we got many of those, especially in certain types of media, and I think you know what kind of media I'm talking about. It is really common to see this character, this extremely resentful, evil character, whose evil is completely excused by the context of the situation. I don't know, the guy lost a child, or maybe just the guy, and this is something really fucked up. Maybe the guy just had bigoted parents. I'm not kidding. Maybe the guy just had bigoted parents, and that for the author is excuse enough for the character to do horrible things. Oh yeah, daddy didn't like black people, so now I'm going to kill 100 people. That's fucked up. And it's fairly common. And I think it's part of these ideologies which clearly encourage that kind of behavior, that kind of people behavior for anything. They encourage lashing out for anything, and I think that's the origin of that kind of sympathetic villain. I think we got too many, and I also think in general, likable villains are excessive. Not necessarily sympathetic, also charismatic, without a redemption. I'm talking of characters who are villains, who don't redeem themselves, who never say, alright, maybe I was wrong, maybe I did something horrible. No. They they never stop doing evil, but people like them. People love them. And they are the cool guys, basically. An example of that would be, for example, charismatic villain, at least charismatic in universe. Maybe not really charismatic, but charismatic in universe at least, would be would be Dio from JoJo's. He's a great villain. I like him as a villain. I detest him as a person, but I have heard many people who find him likable, and the story says he's basically charismatic. I'm not. I don't think he's likable, but I understand if other people disagree, if they like him. But I think the problem is when you purposefully make someone likable like that, and is the villain. And you make the villain likable on purpose, you make the villain relatable, you make the villain too sympathetic, not just sympathetic but extremely sympathetic, and people start rooting for the villain, supporting the villain, and validating the villain. They start acting as if the villain did nothing wrong, as if the villain was right. Phrases like Griffith did nothing wrong come to mind. That kind of situation, I think it isn't healthy. That's my point. I think it isn't healthy. I think it is glorifying evil. I think it is supporting evil and spreading evil in a way. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I think it's wrong. I think it is the open support of evil, the open endorsement of evil, either intentional or accidental, and the result of that support of evil making the audience support evil and subsequently become evil. Now, I must warn you, there are gonna be spoilers of my novels in this, because I will talk about something related to it, to my writing process. So you have been warned. This is the part where I'm done. If you don't want spoilers of my novels, I think this is the part where you can end the video with a message, and I will leave the message at the end, and you can leave the video without an issue. That it is not healthy to have someone evil to root for, and that's why I think we need to stop making sympathetic villains. I think most of you already know what a sympathetic villain is, so I won't spend my time telling you, oh, the sympathetic villain is this or that. We already know. So I think explaining that would be unnecessary, and I think I already explained my point. Glorifying evil isn't right. Having that many sympathetic villains is starting to glorify evil, and we need to take a break from that. I don't say stop making them entirely, but think about them. Think about if it is a good idea to make one, and if you don't want this kind of thing, this spread of evil, maybe consider not making one. I don't feel like making sympathetic villains at all for that reason. With that, I'm done, and this is the part where I start talking about my books, and to be more specific, spoilers of my books you have been writing. You have been warned. I mean, I have like I am going to talk about my writing process. That's why I mix words. You have been warned. This is the time where you should leave. And we start talking about the writing process of my books. When I write a character in my books, I think about whether I want that character to be killed or not. If I want that character to be redeemed or stay evil, stay punished. And when I decide a character must be redeemed or and will not be killed, I try to make sure their evil isn't that severe. For example, I make them forced to do evil, or maybe misguided and convinced that they had to do that, and I make them reflect on it and say, well, I was forced, it was not my decision, but now that I do decide, I have decided against it. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I was doing this because I thought it was what had to be done, and I realized I was wrong, and now that I know it is wrong, I won't do it again. An example of this, it would be this character called Ulrich, who is one of the Knights of White, and he's basically convinced he's doing the right thing until he realized it's too late, and he decides to act against Anna's revolution and joins the protagonists. And basically all that arc is really focused on his redemption. And you have Zenith and Ruan never trusting him, and well, at least until he achieves his redemption, they don't trust him and they think he will betray them, and they are constantly reminding him that he was basically on the side of the bad guys for a long time, and he was wrong and he made mistakes, and he loses an arm as part of his redemption. He doesn't come out of it unscathed. He doesn't come out of it unscathed neither mentally nor physically. He learns the lesson, he suffers to get his redemption, and then starts changing. Then he starts reflecting. After losing his family, he starts reflecting and changing, and then he loses his arm, and that's when his redemption is practically complete, when he's willing to sacrifice his own body to stop evil. And on the other hand, you have this character, Anna, Princess Anna, who is an asshole and inspired by Anita Sarkeesian. I'm not kidding. Well, to be more precise, by a character Anita Sarkeesian made, who is a self-insert of herself. She came up with this like video game idea, which she never actually complete. She never actually carries to term because she never delivers. But this video game idea of this character who was a princess who overthrows a patriarchy, and I decided to shit on her idea and basically make this a spoiled princess who, under the excuse of overthrowing a patriarchal government, she's basically just trying to fuck his family over out of spite and trying to take control to mess with them. She starts a coup and tries to start a revolution, and the protagonist stop her. And this is important, I never mentioned the term feminism. I just use the ideas of feminism because I think using the term would be turning my work into propaganda. And I think that's the point where my book gets, where Steel and Flame specifically and the entire series gets more political, and then there is no more politics. Then we start deviating from that and further away from politics. That's the most political point in my entire series, and I decided to never mention the movement, to never mention the ideology directly. I just put the ideas, especially, into practice, and let the reader see what kind of ideology it is. And if you notice any similarity, the ideology is not named. The ideology is not showcased itself. You notice the similarity because the similarity is there. But this character, she is not redeemed. She's an asshole through and through from the beginning to end. She's defeated, she's arrested, and she's not killed because her relatives asked to keep her alive, but she kind of deserved to be killed. And I do plan to, and that's another part. I don't kill that many characters because when you kill a character, that character can be used again. And I do intend to use her again. I do intend to make her return. Not as dangerous as before because she was already defeated. But I do intend to make her part of the plot again and to close basically her story with another defeat. Probably without killing her again. Odds are she won't die, she will stay alive. And that will be like exactly like you should be dead. You are not, but you should be. You deserve to die, but you will live. And that's the kind of character she is. This character who deserves death, who should be stopped by all means, but will live, will be allowed to exist. And you need to feel disgust for her. And I make the antagonists who are not supposed to be redeemed, who are not supposed to be saved, extremely disgusted. Another example is this guy Sacha, who is part of the King Breakers, and the guy is basically a psychopath. I based most of his attitude and behavior on this character from Warframe. I forgot his name. He was one of the bosses, one of the Grenier bosses. I forgot his name, but he's this a really loud guy who Bayhek. This really loud guy who is always angry and insulting everyone, and all he wants is basically killing the protagonist. And that's the kind of character I wanted for Sasha. He's basically inspired by Bayhek and by the Grenier in general, and a little by terrorists in general, and by the Cult of Rakdos in terms of their color design and their clothing. Basically, the King Breakers are very inspired by the Cult of Rakdos in Magic the Gathering. That's why I picked black and red. Even though my sister said that they kind of had the colors of Antifa, it was not the idea. But when she said that, I was like, yeah, even better. Yeah, if there is a similarity, it's accidental. Originally, they were designed after the Cult of Rakdos, and the other assassins were designed after the House of the Mir. I draw a lot of inspiration, and a little bit also I drew a little bit of inspiration from the assassins in The Witcher and from the Salamandra organization. In fact, basically the whole conflict between Geralt and Salamandra has many similarities on purpose with the conflict between Rugwa and the King Breakers. Of course, it is not everything like that. Of course, it is not all a carbon copy. There are some differences which I made because I wanted to be an entirely original story, even though it draws inspiration from other works. But the similarities are there on purpose, and I wanted to make the characters extremely similar and extremely unlikable. And that's the thing. Sasha is someone you can't like, and he might have his story and his background, and maybe he had a sad and traumatic childhood or something. I don't care. It's not relevant. I don't care. The guy is an asshole. You're supposed to hate him. The guy is a terrorist. You are supposed to hate him. I won't tell you his backstory. And actually, I did think what kind of guy he was before, and all I think is the guy was an asshole. All I think is the guy was never good. The guy had never a reason. He was raised to be a criminal because his ancestors were part of a guild. That is actually mentioned. That is actually brought up. That the guild he's part of is basically old and forgotten, and they are basically they were expelled instead of disbanded, and their descendants continue the operations of the guild. But I don't think of him like this guy who was tortured or anything. or that his life was really harsh because of his childhood. No, he was an asshole. That's the idea with him. He's an asshole. He's evil. He does all those terrorist things because he's evil. Otherwise, he wouldn't have continued the family trait. There is no traumatic childhood. There is no painful past. Everything bad that ever happened to him in his past was the result of him being part of that guild and willingly causing harm. He's supposed to be an asshole. And there is this other antagonist, Peralog, who is a scientist and also an asshole. And he does have this sad situation. He has these problems. He has a terminal disease, which is basically some sort of unspecified magical corruption in a terminal stage, which is basically rotting his body. But the guy is still an asshole. He's not a good person with a bad situation. He's an asshole. He decided to use a forbidden object as a cure because he doesn't care about fucking others over to heal himself. There could be other cures, there could be other ways to save himself, but he doesn't care. He's going to use the worst way possible because he doesn't care about trampling other people for his personal gain. You might think he had a really bad situation and it's understandable that he will do anything to survive, but he's an asshole. He might have a sad story with his terminal illness, but he was already an asshole before the terminal illness. And I actually plan to show his backstory and show he was already an asshole before getting that terminal illness. Because he is supposed to stay an asshole. He's supposed to be an asshole. He isn't a good guy. He isn't a relatable guy. He isn't supposed to be sympathetic. You are supposed to hate him. Not a single one of these antagonists is supposed to be likable. Another villain, the one from the second book. There are several antagonists, but the main bad guy is the leader of the Mercurians. This guy named Procure, who is basically an spoiled brat, and his name is as such, an spoiled brat who is the leader of a guild because of nepotism. He got there because his daddy was in that position and his grandfather was in that position, and the guy accumulated influence in the government and did many corrupt things to get his goal of obtaining the Philosopher's Stone. And he has been basically manipulating everything behind the shadows. He doesn't show up until near the end because he is not supposed to be basically acting there. He's basically doing everyone acting instead of him, and he's an asshole. And he ends up catatonic. He doesn't die. He ends up catatonic. They leave him for dead though, and in fact in the rest of the series they will find out that he didn't die. They assumed he died, but he actually survived. And the guy, well, they will feel pity for him, but he's not supposed to cause sympathy. He's supposed to cause pity, but not sympathy, because he ends up really fucked up. He ends up really fucked up as a result of his own hubris. You are not supposed to like him. You are supposed to feel bad for the people he has hurt. He's an asshole. And that's the kind of villain I like to write. I try to avoid writing these sympathetic villains. There are a few antagonists I have written who, well, they have their reasons or they have this story. Maybe, for example, the third book will feature a villain who is, and you're warned, this is spoilers for the third book, which is not ready yet. We'll have this villain who, well, the main antagonist is basically a group of demons who just want power, but they are basically manipulating this guy who is basically just desperate. They are using and manipulating the guy who is considered to be another main villain. He thinks he's in charge for most of the story, and they act like he's in charge for most of the story, but he's actually just a puppet for the main antagonist, for the real final boss, so to speak. He's just a puppet to the true villain, and he thinks he's in charge, and all he's doing is trying to bring his people back. And he's desperate, and he is wrong, and he realizes he's wrong. That's the important part. he's not precisely sympathetic. You are supposed to feel bad for him, but you know he's doing things that are wrong, and he's scheming and acting wrong, and you are supposed to feel sympathy for him when he starts regretting, not before that. You know the reasons he's doing things, but he's constantly told, you are wrong, this is wrong. And when he realizes and starts acting to stop it, when he reflects and realizes he was wrong, that's when you are supposed to feel sympathy for him. When he fails, when he realizes he was wrong, you say, well, this guy wasn't really that bad. He wasn't even really bad. He was just acting according to and justify the means mentality, which is wrong. And when he realizes he's wrong and he's doing things wrong, he tries to stop the damage he caused. Of course, that won't be easy, and there will be lots of things to do to redeem himself. But the redemption is not impossible because he's not truly redeemable, because he is not the real evil. And I try to I know you might think I need to make it nuanced, I need to make it complex, I need to make it. You don't need to make them sympathetic to make things nuanced, to make things complex. In fact, I am trying, and it isn't easy, and I think it is harder to make a really good villain whose only motivation is fucking other people over. And I was also working on making a story where the antagonists are not necessarily villains. There are evil people among the antagonists, and they will cause trouble. But then the antagonists of the 4th and 5th book, which are already in progress, the idea is making sure they are not villains. They are not evil. You can root for them because they don't all mean harm. There are evil people among them because it's a large organization. But it is not them who make the decisions. They are just basically the part of the organization that does horrible things, and of course they will be defeated and stopped, and well, they face the consequences of their evil. But there are people within the antagonist organization who are really good people. They are just trying to accomplish a goal which is at odds with the goal of the protagonist. That's it. The protagonist has a goal, they have a goal, and they can't accomplish it if the other does. And that's the reason for the story. They are not villains, they are not evil, they are antagonists. They are an obstacle. But they don't really mean harm. They just they just need to do things that are at odds with what the protagonists do. They are not evil. They are not bad. They just have different goals, and it's a conflict of goals. That's why what I wanted to write. Not a story of good versus evil, but a story of two groups with different goals, which are at odds with each other, and try to accomplish their goal. And that means fighting with each other. That means confronting each other. That means friction. That means tension. That means one of them will need to lose. But none of them really means harm to the other. They don't hate each other. They aren't evil. And in fact, many of the antagonists of the fourth book become friends with the protagonists. They like each other. They question when they act in ways that harm the protagonists, because they are like, well, this isn't a bad person, and I am not a bad person either. So this whole the end of justifies the means behavior I'm taking is wrong. Meanwhile, there are other members of the antagonist faction who are like, yeah, fuck those guys, I don't care, because, well, I don't care, I'm not a precisely good person. And that's the difference. You can make a really noble and honorable opponents, really noble and honorable antagonists who are an obstacle for the protagonist, but they don't mean harm. They aren't evil. And that's complexity. You don't need to make the villain likable. And I actually want to make the villains as unlikable and unreasonable as possible without losing coherence. Because there are too many likable villains nowadays. There are too many relatable villains. There are too many villains who people support and root for, and I think that's wrong. I think there is something wrong when people support and root for the bad guy. Well, that's it for today. Have a nice day.